Welcome back, everybody. Today we are talking Solana drama. We have the latest on the recent hack and then also a new development around the faking of over $7.5 billion of total value locked in the Solana DeFi ecosystem. So we're going to cover that and then dive into some price and chart analysis of Solana. So let's waste no time here and get started. First of all, obviously, this has kind of been the main note around Solana in the news. It's coming out now just in the last couple of days that the Solana crypto theft is actually more so linked to a specific app. The Slope mobile wallet actually got hacked in terms of the seed phrases that were given out. And these were mostly hot wallets, and there's no evidence that the protocol was actually compromised itself, so that Solana was compromised itself. And if we take a look at what the assets looked like, what they totaled, how many unique wallets were actually impacted, we're looking at about $4 million in value stolen out of these wallets from about 9,200 unique wallets that were holding assets on Slope Mobile. And if we look at the breakdown here, this is somewhat interesting. We see that it's mostly USDC, and then we have 42% of the hacked amount coming from Solana. So definitely something to keep our eyes on, but less so an issue with Solana, more so an issue with bad code from a project building on Solana. So a very, very important distinction. A lot of people were saying, hey, this is another huge red flag for Solana, where it's more a red flag for this project building on Solana. Now, obviously, a lot of that had developed, the last few days. This just recently developed and was updated today. So we had a developer group, basically fake a large part of the DeFi ecosystem on Solana. And how they went about that was devising a scheme basically to maximize Solana's total value locked. So these two brothers would essentially work hand in hand. They're both developers, and they would build protocols that stack on top of one another. And then that would basically cause the dollar amount to be counted several times. So we're talking about a ton of fake total value locked. And if we actually take a look at the numbers that we're talking about, by their count, they comprise 7.5 billion of Solana's 10.5 billion total value locked at their peak. So the total value locked is exponentially smaller than 7.5 billion that was lying in these protocols, because billions of those dollars were essentially double counted between the two protocols. So you're talking about maybe four times what that value should be. So really we're talking about somewhere between 2 and 2.5 billion that they should have actually been logging in the total value locked, and instead it was 7.5 billion. Now, why that's an issue is because one of the big things that folks were talking about, especially back in the fall of last year, was how incredibly quickly the Solana DeFi ecosystem was growing. But when in reality, a large chunk of this was actually being double counted. It was faked. It wasn't net new funds coming into the DeFi ecosystem, and instead being double counted. So if we see here, it's basically this write-up right here. Is about where that article is talking about. So when we hit 10.3, 10.5 total value locked, 7.5 billion of that was coming from this kind of fraudulent, fake scheme to basically boost the total value locked. So we're talking about 60 to 80% of the total being faked. So that's definitely something we need to keep our eye on. I mean, obviously now, Solana total value locked has returned to more of a reasonable level, about 2 billion total in the Solana DeFi ecosystem, where at our height we were looking at 12 to 13 billion. So definitely a big difference around that, and something that we need to keep our eye on, because there are still shady projects, right? We're in the early stages of crypto, specifically Solana and their DeFi ecosystem. So definitely be careful out there, guys. We do have a lot of protocols that are just trying to essentially muddy the waters. So wanted to point that out there. Now, I will say Solana has had a tough week, right? But, there are a lot of folks out there that, and really, well-known people in the space that are saying, hey, this is kind of part of what happens when you push the envelope. So Sam Bankman-Fried, also known as SBF, he thinks that Solana is the most underrated token with everything even that's going on right now. And what he cites in this article is that whenever you're trying to push the envelope, especially with a layer 1 solution like Solana, layer 2 solution like Solana, that is really trying to overcome Ethereum and potentially be that Ethereum killer, you're going to run into hiccups. And a big piece of what he cites here is that, Solana itself is having less trouble. It's more so the bad news coming out around projects around Solana. Obviously, they've had outages, but weighing those too heavily could be a mistake for investors at this point, given that Solana is at such a tasty price point. Now, going off of that note of price, I do want to get a little into the price and chart analysis here of Solana. We have some interesting chart patterns forming. It's looked super, super solid just in the last month or so. So if we kind of track back where we were just in the middle of June, we're looking at a 55% increase from where we were just a month and a half ago. So really, really impressive month and a half for Solana, doing quite well compared to other altcoins. But a couple things I want to point out here. So first of all, over this kind of, month and a half stretch, you could make the case that we've been developing a rising wedge. Now, a lot of the times, a rising wedge can be a bearish pattern. So the idea being that, you're bouncing off these support and resistance until you kind of get choked here, and then eventually go from the resistance down through the support and back down to check, one of your previous supports, which, would be something between 30 and 35 bucks. But at that point, it'd be really, really interesting to see if that actually plays through. I think we're seeing some very, very strong movement from Solana recently. We've seen us basically try to break this kind of $47 resistance point a few times, actually recently, just in the last couple weeks, right? So we've come up against $47 ish, pretty strong, and we haven't quite been able to break that. And you can see here that is a massive neckline resistance here. If we break that, we're cruising to 60 bucks and higher. So definitely a very, very tough resistance for us to crack right now. But at the same time, we are looking strong in our ability to kind of hold this 35 to 40 level, pretty strongly. We haven't been below this level basically since mid-July. We've been holding this pretty strong, and we haven't checked that again since that mid-July period. So we essentially had this double bottom, and then we got this pump, and now we've basically set our sights on a new support, and we're trying to hold this support right here at about $35 as long as we can, and hopefully we eventually break that $47 resistance. If we do not, it's likely that we see a fall back to this double bottom support at around $31. And then if we drop through that, we're probably going to see something around $24. And if we can't hold that for any reason, we'll be playing between $12 and that $24 mark based on the support and resistance levels that we saw back in 2021. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. I think reasonably we're looking for Solana to get back up to $60 as soon as possible. That $55 to $60 range right here would really be awesome, getting above that resistance of that $47 mark. So that's really the critical spot we're looking at right now. So 47 on that resistance mark, and the support ideally would stay at around $37. But as we kind of start forming these chart patterns over the next week, watch out for that rising wedge. Tends to be a bearish pattern, doesn't always play out, but we definitely have an opportunity to go back to the downside as well. But that's what I'm seeing. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. We got a little Solana news. We got a little Solana price and chart analysis. But let me know if there's anything else you want me to cover in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.